Welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. We'll begin in 40 seconds.
But my point is that yes, so we got more than 4,000 other people to petition just in the state of Washington alone. But what I needed to do now was I needed to go around the country, raise awareness on the issue, start bringing together all of the other states that do this, start preparing for and joining those states into the litigation, because I personally can't sue, for instance, the state of Texas. I'm not from Texas. The 11th Amendment would bar me from being able to sue the state of Texas. I can finish the suit against the state of Washington, but I don't want to just beat Washington when all these other states need help. So what we've done here is that I've identified people within all these states that have been charged improperly by way of information, not by indictment. I've collected criminal affidavits on behalf of them or from them personally, and then we've taken them and served them on first the attorney generals of the states. So like Texas, I went down there and I personally took an affidavit signed by victims within the state who have been charged by information, not by indictment, in violation of the Constitution. And I took them to your attorney general, and I served them on an assistant attorney general there, and basically just said, listen, your prosecuting attorneys, because the attorney general is in charge of all the law enforcement. That's the highest law enforcement officer in the state. He's in charge of all the prosecutors. So if the prosecutors are acting unconstitutionally in violation of the United States Constitution because they're relying upon an inferior state statute, then by going to their boss and saying, hey man, please correct the unlawful acts, the criminal acts of your agents, but if you don't, then you are permitting it to continue, and so that's what I did. I first went to the attorney generals, served all of them in 47 states. Then when the attorney generals failed to resolve this, then I went back and I served the state Supreme Courts, because they're in charge of all the judges. If the judges are conspiring with the prosecutors to deprive of rights because the judge is making a decision to hold someone over for this offense without an indictment by a grand jury, now we can go to the highest judicial officer and say, okay, please correct the unlawful acts of all of your agents. But if you don't, then you are permitting it to continue and you're now implicated in it. We did the same thing. They failed to take action. So then we needed to bring in the third branch of government that really has nothing to do with, with the conspiracy. Because if you think about it, the state of Texas created a law that permits their prosecuting attorneys to abridge their obligations in the Constitution, right? That's pretty simple. The state prosecutors are then relying upon that inferior state law to go out and to charge people improperly in violation of the Constitution, abridging their obligations that they have codified in the Constitution, and they're bringing that incorrect charging instrument to a judge. Well, they just committed the crime of deprivation of rights under color of law. There's no denying that. Title 18 USC subsection 242. And so then when they bring it to a judge and they say to the judge, I'd like you to hold this person over, that judge has a duty and responsibility to make sure that he doesn't exceed the power authority statutorily conferred upon him. If he chooses to hold someone over for that infamous crime without an indictment by a grand jury, because the prosecutor brought the information, not the indictment, that judge has the duty to say, no, I can't do that. I can't exercise my power because I would be violating the Constitution. So when they fail to uphold the Constitution, willfully or negligently, it doesn't matter, because any breach of constitutional obligation, there's no right to self-defense for public officials. So the moment that judge holds someone over, well, he's now depriving of rights under color of law, but he's also establishing a conspiracy by and between himself and the prosecuting attorney, and that is Title 18 USC subsection 241, conspiracy to deprive of rights. Mm-hmm. Then when that judge signs that order, right, after depriving of rights under color of law and establishing a conspiracy, and then hands it to a sheriff's deputy and says, please go out and execute this warrant, that sheriff can't go out and execute that warrant without depriving of rights under color of law also. right? And being a member of the conspiracy also. Willfully or negligently, it doesn't matter. Sheriff, you can't go out and execute a warrant that derives from an unconstitutional act and have that arrest be constitutional, which means that you yourself are engaged in that criminal conspiracy. You're a member of it. And unfortunately,
Absolutely.
the moment that you arrest someone without lawful authority to perform an arrest and you put them into a jail against their will and you hold them there under ransom in the form of bail, you've just committed the crime of kidnapping. Title 18, subsection 1201, right? And so this is a situation. We have a conspiracy by and between the executive branch and the judicial branch to undermine the laws of the United States. And when I go to to the legislative branch, like the Senator Cruz, who I've talked with his legislative director and informed his legislative director that this is happening, his legislative director said to me, yeah, but that's a state issue. We don't get involved in that. We abstain from that because that's a state issue, not a federal issue. I'm like, no, it's not. That's a federal right being deprived by a state. That's a federal issue, not a state issue. Yeah, we don't get involved. We abstain. We don't get involved. So, you know, the narrative that I get from the legislative branch consistently, whether it's representatives, senators, whoever, they say, oh, that's someone else's problem, not ours, right? We don't want to get involved because that's a big deal. 700,000 people currently in prison in violation of the Constitution of the United States of America by a conspiracy to undermine the laws of the United States by and between the judicial branch and the executive branch. That's a big deal, big enough that the legislative branch wants to stand back and say, well, we just want to ignore this and not be involved in this. So I had to find a way to remove their ability to abstain, right? How do we make the legislative branch get involved in this and address this when they're not a part of the criminal conspiracy technically, right? Technically. Well, we did that through what's called an emolument violation. You see, you can never pay someone to commit a crime. You can never pay someone to break the Constitution. That's called an emolument violation, right? An emolument violation. So if you pay someone to breach their constitutional obligations, that would be a crime in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So when you go out to these cities, right, if it's the police officers that are performing arrests and charging by information because the police don't know any better, that's what they're taught to do in their little police academy. You know, oh, rely upon the state statute that says you can do this and don't question anything else. And that's just the way it's done. Well, who pays for the police to do their work? City council, right? City council pays for the police to do their job. Well, who pays for the sheriff to go out and execute warrants? Well, that'd be the county commissioners, right? Yep. Who pays for the jail? Well, that would also be the county commissioners because it's a county jail. So what we're doing now is that the legislative branch pays for the people, the public officials, to do their work. Budgets originate from the legislative branch. So legislators, senators, congressmen, city council members, if you want to stand back and pretend like nothing's happening, ignore what's really going on and blame them for the issue, well, we're going to go ahead and come into your public meeting, have a public hearing to where Jessica and I, as well as 100 other people across the country, are going to say to you, this is what the Constitution says, this is what the police are doing, and you guys are paying them to do it. Therefore, you're responsible for these because if you didn't pay them, they wouldn't commit any crimes at all, right? Hell, nobody's going to do anything if you don't pay them to do it. Right. So what we're doing now is we're putting city councils on notice, county commissioners on notice. We're going in, and what Jessica is doing is she's reading a 2-page script, right? 2 pages that I prepared, and it basically says, Constitution of the United States is the overarching requirements. No denying that. Constitution Clause 1 of Amendment 5 says this, state of whatever does something different. An emolument violation is you pay someone to break the law. Therefore, you guys are paying for these crimes to be committed, and we are here to provide notice to you that you can no longer do this. And if you do, criminal sanctions can come from that. And now we put the burden onto the legislative branch to say, do you want to be a part of this? You don't have to be, right? But now you've been put on notice. Now, if you continue to pay, now you are knowingly and willingly committing that crime. And you're a part of the criminal conspiracy because you're paying for people to deprive of rights under color of law. You're aware of the conspiracy and you're not mitigating it. So we had to find a way to bring the third branch of government in to put some skin in the game and to say, are you guys going to do something about this? Because clearly the Supreme Court isn't, and nor is the Attorney General. So maybe you guys will, maybe not. But what I can say is that we're getting some good and receptive responses from the city councils, the mayors in a number of different places. They are saying to us, how could this happen? And what do we need to do to fix this?
I bet you'd like to sit down with the vice president of the Fraternal Order of Police Officers, huh?
The truth is that my degree is in substantive law. It's not adjective law. I have a master's in substantive law, which means I have a degree in law enforcement. I speak law enforcement. When I talk to law enforcement, they know what I'm saying. They understand it. It makes sense to them. I don't speak attorney's language. That's why attorneys absolutely hate it. That's why I'm the opposite of an attorney, is because I deal with the enforcement of the law. I do what a prosecutor should be doing, but a prosecutor should never be an attorney, right? Attorneys are administrative officers of the court. They follow administrative law. They should not have anything to do with law enforcement. Law enforcement is substantive law, not administrative law. So I have a degree that a prosecutor should have, right? And law enforcement should never be following attorneys, such as with the FBI right now. Cash Jackson, he's an attorney. He's not law enforcement, right? And so when law enforcement, who's part of the executive branch, right, they're there to enforce the law, when they fail to recognize the fact that you are following judicial branch because an attorney is put into place to lead you, well, now you have consolidation of law enforcement into the hands of the judiciary, and that's not the way it was supposed to be. When I go and I speak to an attorney general, for instance, or an investigator for attorney general, such as I did in Rhode Island, and I inform them of this, and they say, well, I'm going to have to go and get information from my attorney. Fuck your attorney. This has nothing to do with your attorney. This has to do with your obligations in law enforcement. That's what, so if you're going to go to an or a member of the administrative branch, the judicial branch, in order to find out how you're supposed to act when you're a member of the executive branch, then I'm going to say that the administrative branch, the judicial branch, is able to control everything at that point. And there lies what we had, right?
Yeah.
Law enforcement should not be following them. But yeah, I mean, and we do get a lot of reception, good reception, positive reception from law enforcement. There's a lot of law enforcement that sit down after we're done and they ask me questions. And often, typically, the question is, am I going to be in trouble if you win this case? I'm like, well, I can say that today, what you're doing is a crime. It is illegal. And you can probably mitigate that according to law, but that's a decision you're gonna have to make. But that's the typical question that I get. I did have a couple sheriffs. One sheriff in particular, he met with me when we were traveling across the country, and he took his badge off his uniform and gave it to me, and said, "I support what you're doing. You're doing the right thing."
Wow.
The problem is that we're not getting them to step out into the public and support this publicly just yet. But I'm telling you, Floyd, we're about to have that. There are a number of places where there are people teetering on the edge of deciding, am I going to support this, or am I going to pretend like nothing's happening and risk my life as a result of it?
If you and Jessica or whomever make it to Houston, let me know, and I will set up a meeting with you and whoever you bring or whoever you send, with Ray Hunt. You don't know who Ray Hunt is. He's the executive director, former past president of the Houston Policemen Patrolmen's Union.
Okay.
The president came after him is now the vice president of the Fraternal Order of Police Officers nationwide. Yeah. He's the one who went and endorsed Trump in Florida when he was running.
Yeah.
So if you want to meet with those two gentlemen, and I'm sure they can reach out to the constable's office, the Houston Independent School Police, as well as the sheriff's department, and do a little presentation. I'm sure, I can make that happen for you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So we will be back to Houston again. We're about to start another loop around the country. We're going to continue to do this until we've raised enough noise, until we brought enough attention to the issue that the court agrees to hear it. So what we're doing is, I've traveled back and forth, coast to coast across this country 24 times in probably last 28 months. And I just keep on circling the country. And as we circle the country, we have different things that we do, like serving the attorney generals or serving the Supreme Courts, or right now serving city council, county commissioners. The last loop, I think that the last time we talked, we were getting ready to travel the country, and we did rallies and seminars, education opportunities, where we were building the affidavits and the 500,000 criminal affidavits that we did. But so that's what I do. I mean, we travel around the country to try to inform people of these issues and make them aware of it, so that we can raise enough noise to where the court can no longer ignore it. Because again, the court's going to ignore this as long as the people
Oh, yeah.
are not aware of the issue, right? But once the people are made aware, then there comes a point in time when the court can't ignore it anymore, and then we get heard. And so that's what we're doing. And but we will be back in Houston. So we're planning another loop right now to continue to serve.
Thank you for hanging around after the show. I want to present to you Tailor-Made Trust, featuring Ann LaFleur's Trust Series, available at tailormadetrust.com, as well as the fearlessfloydshow.com store. Here are a handful of the available trusts that can be built, custom tailored to your needs and desires. 25 different trusts, plus the DNA trust addendum. And as always, Ann LaFleur's classic trusts and ancillary classes, and also Ann's books on trust and specialty trust, which I also co-authored. If you'd like to get a class, a book, or have a trust custom built for you, always available at the fearlessfloydshow.com store. And I'll see you in the next show. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.